Welcome back. Today I'm going to be ranking every champion in Pokemon and some guys who technically are not champions. So this video is not going to be as straightforward as my ranking rivals video. This video is going to be about the games though, just to be clear. Just like the rivals video, it's about canonical strength, not about how hard their teams are to beat or whose team is the most competitively viable. With that out of the way, I'm going to be breaking down the connections between trainers. Using like a mind map. Did you guys ever make mind maps at school? Not important. I'm going to speak on every champion's achievements and their relationships with other trainers. Then I'll fill in the gaps and give it an opinionated ranking based on as many facts as I could find. So naturally, let's start at the beginning with Gen 1 champion Blue, who collected all 8 badges before taking on the league and defeating the Elite Four, which included Lance. Coincidentally, this other guy was taking on the league at the same time. Usually when a trainer defeated the Indigo Elite Four, they became a champion and moved on. But due to this rare circumstance, they decided to restructure the Pokemon League by requiring a challenger to defeat the Elite Four and current champion to receive the title. So Blue loses to the player character Red. After this, he becomes a gym leader while also seemingly traveling across the world to regions like Kalos and Alola. So we definitely know Red is going above Blue. He straight up beats him in Gen 1 and 3, but in Gen 2, 4, and 7, Red out levels him. Like even in Sun and Moon, where you get to choose which one you wanted to battle, they still let you know Red is the better trainer. But since we're talking about Alola, in those games, Blue's levels are identical to Kukui's rematch team, while in Ultra Sun Ultra Moon, Blue's levels are higher than both Kukui's and How's. Let's move over to Gen 2's Lance, first appearing as the final Elite Four member before transitioning to a champion at some point between Gen 1 and 2. In Gen 1, he lost to both Red and Blue. He's very easy to place below Red, but Blue is a harder decision. Yes, he lost to him, but in Gen 4, his rematch team is higher than Blue's. I'm gonna put Blue above him though, since beating someone in battle is a better metric of who is stronger than just having a higher level team. So at some point in time, Lance faced Kukui. Now, was this before or after he became champion? We don't know. Kukui calls him the last guy, but even if he faced him before Red and Blue, he would have been the last guy since there was no standing champion. Also, due to that, Kukui winning means he'd have an obligation to stay and become a part of the Pokemon League. I'm pretty confident they had to battle him before he became champion, since in Let's Go, Mina appears in that game, and Mina is at least a few years younger than Kukui. So Kukui likely challenged the league before she got there. So who won between Lance and Kukui? I'm gonna lean towards Lance since Kukui is never referenced to be a champion anywhere in the world of Pokemon media. If you guys have an example of that not being the case, I'd love to hear it. Honestly, if Lance lost to Kukui, what does he have left? Give this poor man a win. Next up, let's talk about Red, the only player character we'll be discussing, since they're actually an NPC that you can battle. So he defeated Lance in Blue, becoming the champion of the Indigo League. He held the highest level Pokemon in the series for a long time, until BDSP where someone finally tied him. I really don't like talking about player characters, and apparently so does Game Freak, but I will say the conclusion of Gen 2, the battle between Red and Ethan / Chris / Lyra, I think the conclusion to that battle is supposed to be undecided. So you could say Red is one of the only characters on this list who's never definitely lost a battle. So Red goes nicely at the top of this portion of the champion map. Alright, I'm gonna go extremely out of order by talking about Kukui, but he happens to fit into this section of the video. So Kukui traveled across Alola, completing the Island Challenge. Afterwards, he decided to not become a trial captain, and instead traveled to Kanto, completing the Gym Challenge, and then facing off against the Elite Four, where he matched up against Lance. I assume that Lance won that battle, so I'm gonna put Kukui below him. So Kukui is faced in the final challenge in Sun and Moon after beating the Elite Four and officially becoming the first Alola champion. I don't think Kukui beat the Elite Four. I mean, unless you think you're battling Hala while he's battling Olivia and then he quickly runs to the same exact spot. I'm gonna assume that's not the case though. Next, let's move on and talk about the trainer you face instead of Kukui in the Ultra Sun Ultra Moon games. How? So How completed the Island Challenge and defeated the Elite Four. It is the final battle for the player before completing the main story. In Sun and Moon, you can face him in a title defense battle where his team is just way below Kukui's, only having 5 Pokemon. How does have the edge level-wise in Ultra Sun Ultra Moon, and is the actual champion battle in the more recent game. I'm gonna put How below Kukui though, since Kukui blows How out of the water in the Sun and Moon games, while just being barely below him in the Ultra games. Also, a second less factual point, I've always considered Kukui being the person you face as a more real champion battle. Fighting How just seemed more of a way to change the game and make the Ultra versions different. Like when I think of the Hoenn champion, I think about Steven, not Wallace. So this placement is a little arbitrary. Also, Kukui went up against the Indigo Elite Four and the Alola Elite Four in his title defense battles, while How only has ever faced the Alola Elite Four. Also, like the Alola Elite Four lose to like 12 different trainers. Like, do I really have to get challenged every time I beat the Elite Four? Like, can you guys do your job one time? Like we have a rock and a flying type Elite Four member. Neither of you could be Guzma's Bono Bug team? Let's finish out Gen 7 with Trace. So Trace's journey is basically the same as Blue's in Gen 1. Get 8 badges, beat the Elite Four, become champion, lose to the player right away. So Trace appears in Let's Go, which features Lance, Blue, and Red, who all at post-game battles. Red and Blue are already higher level than Trace in the Let's Go timeline, so if you add up the 20 plus years of experience they have in the regular timeline, yeah, they're a little bit better of trainers than Trace. So I'm gonna slot Trace right between Lance and Blue, just as the levels indicate. Arguing Lance is better than Trace is totally valid, feel free to, but I'm not on your side. Let's shift over to the next section with Steven, the Hoenn champion of Ruby and Sapphire and their remakes. So a lot of people think that Wallace beat him to become the champion. I don't really know why people think that. Like, do you guys think Emerald happens after Ruby and Sapphire? Because that wouldn't make any sense at all. The reason Wallace is the champion in Emerald isn't because he beat him in a battle. Steven stepped down as champion because he really likes traveling and rocks. His name is Steven Stone after all. Also, even in Emerald, Steven is a secret boss in that game and is way above Wallace. Plus in Oras, after the Delta episode, we see Steven basically, to paraphrase, he says that he plans to leave the region and asks Wallace to help him through the transition of no longer being the league champion. To talk a little bit about Steven as a trainer, he's just primarily a steel team while also using ground types and rock types, usually Pokemon that have been around for a very long time. He also has access to Mega Evolution, but I guess everyone we've talked about before him has either had access to Mega Evolution or Z moves, so it's not that special. Yeah, Wallace. I mean, he's just below Steven. I do wonder if Wallace ever battled the Elite Four, or if he just got appointed the title. I could even see a theory that he was the champion before Steven, but if that was true, realistically some NPC would have mentioned that. Wallace is another gym leader turned champion. Unfortunately, he did not expand outside of his type. The only other champion who uses one type exclusively in their first league battle is Lance, who uses a mono flying type team. Shout out to him. Moving on, we have Cynthia, one of the most beloved champions in this series, boasting an insanely high level team, especially in BDSP. Though unfortunately for me, in the Sinnoh games, there's no other Pokemon champions. Plus, we haven't seen her face off against anyone on this list. She does, however, famously appear in the Unova region post-game, where her levels are identical to Alder's in Black and White, and identical to Iris's in the sequel game, so that's at least something to go off of. She also appears in the World Tournament like every other champion before Gen 5. That's not her only battle facility appearance though, as she appears in the Alola Battle Tree. Unfortunately, she doesn't have many battles outside of the facility, so it doesn't do too much for me, besides showing she has Megas. So, like Alder is the Unovan champion in Black and White, and he's not near the top of the ladder in his region. So he loses to N, who is below Ghetsis level-wise, and both those guys lose to the player character. Then he goes on to lose to Iris, who then loses to the player character of those games. I mean, saying Ghetsis is the better trainer between the two might be controversial, but nonetheless, it's easy to compare Alder to a lot of trainers. Also, a fun fact about Alder is, Ghetsis implies that he never became the champion by battling his way through the league, but he might have just been appointed the position. Also, he's possibly the hero who used the ancestors of the 10 noble Pokemon in Legends Arceus, which means that he defeated Arceus. Now that's just a theory though. It's completely possible that it wasn't Alder and it was instead his ancestor, so I'm not just gonna give him that accolade. Maybe we'll learn more about that in a future game. To be nice to Alder, I really like that in Black 2 White 2 his World Tournament team represents the Unovan Elite Four. Cool idea. So N defeated Alder and has a legendary Pokemon. N isn't actually considered a champion despite him beating the Elite Four and Alder. That's probably because he never entered the Hall of Fame and instead just made a giant castle appear instead. Not really how the ceremony was supposed to go. He also more than likely didn't collect all 8 badges, since his name doesn't appear on the gym statues. He also very uniquely has the ability to speak to Pokemon. At least we can put him nicely above Alder. Speaking of above Alder, we have Iris, who beat Alder to become the champion before the events of Black 2 White 2. Unfortunately, there's not really much else to say. Her rematch levels do match Cynthia's though, and both of them are also higher level than N. But in Black 2 White 2, N is like 4 rematch teams, all based on different seasons, made up of a bunch of level 75 plus Pokemon. So it's not really something I can really go off of. Though, since Cynthia matches Iris level wise, and Iris beat Alder, we at least have a reason to put Cynthia above Alder, besides bias. There's really next to nothing you can say about Diantha. They don't do anything, which makes it really hard to rank them. She's one of like 5 people in her entire region who knows how to do the gimmick of the generation, so that's a plus maybe. I don't know, maybe if she taught more people in her region how Mega Evolution works, she wouldn't be the champion. Not to be too negative, she doesn't really do anything. This part of the champion map feels unfinished, just like X and Y. Next up, we have the undefeated champion of Galar, which is an achievement, I guess, even though basically everyone else on this list was an undefeated champion before we battled them. So Leon set out at age 10 and defeated the gym leaders, and went on to become champion in his first attempt, hence his undefeated moniker. He also spent time training underneath former champion Mustard. So Gen 8 started a trend of not referencing basically anything outside of this generation. Like even the remakes of Gen 8 don't connect to Sword and Shield at all. So there's nothing really connecting him to any of the trainers I spoke of before this besides the anime. I've seen the whole Masters 8 tournament by the way, but that's not something I'm trying to take into consideration in this video. I don't think Game Freak ever intended for Leon to meet up with any of the champions from the other regions. After beating Leon, he turns the Rose Tower into a battle tower, because his goal is for Galar to have the strongest trainers in the world. After completing the DLCs, you learn he's now the chairman of the Pokemon League, and he also hosts a Galarian Star Tournament, which features the strongest trainers in the region. At this event, he's actually lower level than Mustard, so Mustard has 3 level 80s while Leon has 2 and a level 78. But Leon does actually have a 3rd level 80 in the starter Pokemon left behind at the beginning of the game, so there's no actual gap between the two. So Mustard, some people love it, some people hate it, but he was a fighting type gym leader who became the champion after defeating Opal 50 years ago before the events of Sword and Shield. Does this imply that Opal used to be champion? Well, since she's still referred to as a gym leader in his rare league card, probably not. So Mustard served as the champion for 18 years, the longest in Galarian history, which is probably a big achievement. I can't quantify, I don't know how long anyone else was champion. His partner Pokemon died at some point, resulting him in eventually losing the position as champion as he slipped up in a battle. The chairman at some point after this proposed rigging battles. An honorable guy like Mustard had had enough and decided to train by traveling across the Pokemon world before settling down on an island he bought near Galar, the Isle of Armor. He's also canonically a gamer, so yeah, that might place him higher or lower depending on how you feel about that. Leon and Mustard seem to be basically on equal footing, so they're definitely going to end up very close to one another when I start ranking. So next up we have Steel Peony, former gym leader and later became champion. This guy's idea of a family vacation is finding and battling legendary Pokemon, which I won't lie, kinda cool. So he's most likely not the trainer who beat Mustard, though I guess it's not flat out deconfirmed. So Peony became champion sometime after Mustard stepped away from the league, but then Peony also stepped down after Rose became the new chairman, which does mean he never lost a champion, which almost everyone on this list cannot say. Also, he's more than likely not the person Leon beat to become champion, since Peony stepped down before ever losing the position. You can face Peony in the Galarian Star Tournament, where he is lower level than Mustard and Leon by a lot, like even Raihan's higher level than him. So he is the weakest out of the 3 champions in Sword and Shield. I'd say level-wise, accolade-wise, also he is the only person we're going to talk about in this entire video who never uses 6 Pokemon. Alright, who invited the psychopath? This guy doesn't even know what a Pokemon League is. Yeah, I'm not actually going to rank this dude. He's not a champion. Though he does basically fit the role of a champion, a rival, and an evil team leader. Kinda just did it all in that game. Also, I'm not talking about AI Sada or Turo, since I'm 100% sure they never challenged the league because they physically couldn't. Alright, here we are at Gen 9, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet with the top champion Geeta. She's the champion, so as you expect, she has the respect of the trainers in her region, like Rika and Nemona. Unfortunately, she doesn't have the respect of the people who play the game. Her team is really not important in this video. It'd be cool if it was way better though. Oh, don't mind that card. Actually, please mind that card. So Geeta is the top champion as well as the organizer of the league in Paldea. For a trainer to earn the title of champion in Paldea, they must do a test, then beat the Elite Four before they finally have to face her and come out victorious, just as the next trainer did. Nemona defeated Geeta to become a champion. Pretty cut and dry, open and shut case here. After that, she repeated the gym challenge again with a new team alongside the player character. The whole point of her second treasure hunt was to find a trainer she could go all out against, which she found in the player. Since she beat champion Geeta while holding back, Nemona goes above Geeta is all I can definitively say, since the game also features no trainers from the past games. Now that all the facts have been laid out, it's up to me to rank everyone. So I'll be putting these guys in tiers to group them together. I call this tier, barely if even a champion. At the bottom we have How, above him is Peony. I think Peony's experience in having the title of champion puts him above How, but below Kukui. I was really split on who to put above the other between these two. I decided to go with Kukui. Despite him not being a proper champion, Kukui is the strongest trainer in Alola, while Peony might be the 3rd or 4th strongest in Galar. So I decided to give the nod to Kukui in this case. The next tier is the substitute teacher tier. This tier has Lance and Wallace. Both these guys got that champion status kinda by default. Neither of these characters were the best trainers in their region when they got the title of champion. Steven was better than Wallace, while Red and Blue and Trace go above Lance. I'm gonna put Lance above Wallace because I think he improved a lot as a trainer when he went from Elite Four member to champion, with all the losses I mentioned coming when he was still considered an Elite Four member. I'm calling the tier above below the best. This tier consists of Trace, Geeta, and Alder. This tier consists of 3 trainers who aren't the best in their region. They also have another thing in common, with none of them ever beating a champion. Alder was appointed champion apparently, while in Geeta's case there was no final battle, all you had to do was beat the Elite Four to become a champion. And Trace had a very similar situation where all he had to do to become champion was beat the Elite Four. The tier above is called the Unfortunate tier. The only person in this tier is Blue. It's called the Unfortunate tier because unfortunately for Blue, Game Freak only cares about one player character, and sadly, it's the one who beat Blue. Let's move one step higher to the very best tier. Kind of self-explanatory. I'm just gonna preface, I don't have an order in mind for this tier. I really don't have a way to determine who's above another. I will put Diantha at the bottom because she has nothing I can credit her with and nothing I can discredit her by. Truly a nothing character. The rest of the tier is made up of Nemona, Steven, Cynthia, Iris, and Mustard and Leon. So this tier is for the very best in a region. Yet I have multiple people from Unova and Galar. That's because I really could not justify one of the trainers being better than the other. especially Leon and Mustard. Like, that one could really go either way. Don't worry though, I won't shortchange you guys. This video does have a number 1. At the cheater tier, we have Red. So Red gets his own tier because he spent like 30 bucks to raise Pokemon, and this is a pay to win list. It doesn't matter if Cyrus is about to destroy the universe. If you white out as the player character, you can just heal up and get right back like nothing ever happened, which is an amazing ability no one below him has access to. I hope this doesn't come off as a massive cop-out. If you enjoyed the videos, stick around, subscribe. Well, later.